this ticking clock here in terms of organisations coming into the sector. So the ACNC, I heard estimate in the last year or so, by about 2025, we're looking at about 64,000 charities. So that's a lot, but think about this other number, which I think is actually quite telling. Of that 57,500, 83% have gross revenues of $1 million or less. And for me, when I look at having run an organisation with a gross revenue now of 70 mil, and we moved from 24 years ago to 70, but I think what we could and couldn't do then, what we can do now in terms of funding and outcomes and impact, it's a serious question. Now, I'm not suggesting for a moment, and please don't hear me wrong in saying big charity good, small charity bad. That's not for a moment. But there is a question about scalability and sustainability and even overlap in this context. So again, this question can evoke a number of arguments, including, oh, there are too many charities. I'm not a subscriber to that view. I think I do believe in market forces, but I suspect what's perhaps missing is the process and the judgment that might sit behind why I want to start a charity. Every time you see a celebrity start a charity, you go, oh, good, another one, great. Another, again, blessed, but some are good and some maybe not. But there are some challenges out there as well. Or a well-intended response to a particular issue about setting something up terrific, but is it actually going to solve a problem, or is it just something about solving your response to a problem? And there's some harsh challenge in all of that. You know, I think there is a real question in terms of, are you being guided by passion or mission in this question? And that's something that, you know, we as in a governance and an executive and a management role are challenged to think about. So there's a real question here in terms of, well, what does the market look like and what does it need to look like? And how does that ideally self-regulate better than it might be at the moment? So there's a few other things that are looming on the horizon. Just over a year or so ago, we saw some research that tells us around 86% of charities, 86% of Australians trust charities, and 91% currently donate to charities. And that's a good number. But Australians are giving less to charity than generosity is declining, so that's a concerning report. And that in the same period, 2017, Giving Australia report identified about $1 billion reduction in donations bequests in the prior year. So these actually throw out some challenging points for us to really think about in terms of what's going on in the market. And again, I'll stress, I don't think for a moment it's about people getting less generous or giving less. I think there are a number of actually challenging factors in there. And yes, the economic environment might be one, but I don't think that's necessarily the factor. Let's just throw a bit more data in here to give you some context. From the Australian Charities Report, 2 months or so ago, identified that unsolicited face-to-face fundraising was widely acknowledged as the most cost-efficient way to obtain large volumes of donors. Okay, so there's a couple of things here. Face-to-face means I ask you face-to-face, not calling you or emailing you. And one of the most overt modalities of that is the face-to-face, be it street shopping centres, etc., which is roundly dismissed as chuggers. You know, look, sure, I say straight out, there are some of the practices and execution aren't what they need to be in market, and that is a concern, and it's a real issue. But flipping it around when done well, it's been responsible for the most significant growth in fundraising in the past 20 years by daylight. And it's completely not replaceable by any other modality, past, present, or future. Okay? So I've had people say, oh, this doesn't make any money. Well, it actually does, if done well. The challenge is how you disturb market. Nearly 50%, 49.7% of all charity revenue generated from membership fees, user-pay services and other sources, and 43% coming from government grants and contract payments, 7.3% coming from donations and bequests. So there's an interesting question in terms of those sets of numbers around what possibilities might there be around that relatively elastic opportunity through giving if we actually tap into the sense of self-identity and the way in which people feel. But I'm going to suggest that in the main, in the marketplace in Australia and internationally, we are still treating donors from a transactional point of view, a hole-in-the-wall ATM. And every time we measure, and I'll come back to the question of measurement, in single form, single unit metrics, we're adding to that particular pain point. Again, just a couple of other headlines from Giving Australia. Every day, donors are the most commonly targeted. Nearly 50% of organisations didn't target any other source. So again, I hear, oh, well, you want some money, go to the big end of town, go to the companies. Maybe 10% of overall revenues, that's not where the money's at. Milton Friedman, the economist, is known to have said it's not the job of a public company to give away its money, it's there to make money for shareholders. So don't go knocking on Westpac's door. You could, but not without a proposition.
Not right
now. Actually, interestingly enough, I saw the CEO of the organisation I'm on the board of actually did address Westpac because of the child abuse issues, and that was probably not an unreasonable conversation. Women give away a greater proportion of their taxable income than men, while men give away more overall. Individuals 65 and over donate much more than other age groups, probably because they've got more money. We talk about millennials. Let's go to the millennials. That'd be cool. Well, my children are 30 and 28. And up until reasonably recently, well, only for one of them anyway, they really don't have any money. So it's a case of saying, well, yeah, sure, the motivation might be great, but got fish with a fisher. So, and 65 and over isn't that old as someone who's only 6 years off that mark. So religious organisations gather more than others, but our religious affiliation is declining. And whilst we talk about technology and social media, face-to-face still reigns supreme. And it's about relationships. So again, I hear people, oh, what can we do in digital space? What can we do with technology? Well, really, it's only another iteration of what we've always done. 40, 30 years ago, we were talking about mail. 20 years ago, phone. It's a channel, it's a medium. It's not actually a way, it's not the main means of engaging people. So we've got to think about what conversation we're having. And the other thing I just want to touch on, the point is useful just in closing, is this, two things. 60% of people giving on the spur of the moment, but those who plan their donations give 6 times more. So this idea of deliberate planned giving being far more beneficial. And the other stat just to share is the fact that other market research from more strategic reports in the last 6 years, fundraising return on investment is declining year on year. Okay? So, trust, important. The Edelman report talks about declining trust in charities. Interesting, this year it's swung up a bit, but 12 months ago there was conversation of really putting more trust in corporate CEOs than in charities. I wonder why that's changed over the last 12 months. And that's not unreasonable for anyone that follows fundraising and charities on an international scale. You may have come across the Olive Cook case in the UK 4.5 years ago, where Olive Cook, Britain's best known poppy seller, took her own life at the age of 92 when found in a home a whole lot of charity mail. The headline was in Fleet Street, who would imagine this? Olive Cook hounded to death by charities. Sorry, I'm bumping that. I'm doing the presentation here again, John. But that wasn't the case at all. Olive Cook had a depressive illness and took her own life because she couldn't cope with life. But it was a case of this overlay. But it's sort of sparked a whole lot of challenges in the UK in terms of scrutiny and regulation and response, and fundraising has declined materially in the UK as a result of that. And there's some similar other challenges in the US and Canada in similar markets. So, but we do see generally a more questioning, inquiring public, a greater media focus, greater union interest, certainly a far greater complexity in the regulatory environment than we've ever experienced. And my observation from being 3.5 decades in the sector is I've never seen a more volatile and complex environment that we operate in. So there's a challenge for us. But what does it actually ask us? So, first of all, we know trust and reputation drives generosity. And we're told there's a declining trust in charity. So what do we do about that? And these are some questions I want to throw back to you. How do we engage our supporters on trust beyond the simplistic concepts we've defaulted to for decades? The simplistic concepts being, I run a good cause, you should be interested in my cause, give me money, and do it at the lowest cost base. And I'm being simplistic, but this is the synopsis of what I hear. And we get very, not unreasonably, lost in ourselves. I do big and important work. An unpopular conversation in my world at Marta is, no one wants to come to hospital. Now, I'm going to actually posit that to be true. Now, there might be the odd exception. I don't know, Tracy, who's been from Uniting Care, whether anyone flocked to the hospitals Uniting Care around?
Well, no, not generally.
No. Hospital openings won't big events.
Doctors, and I'm not talking about the health professionals in this context, I'm talking about patients. So my point here is, that's not why you're relevant. You're relevant because there are other things that connect with you. And even for those people that have come to Mater and have great experiences that bring home a new baby, are generally focused on something more than the cause that they've been involved in. Okay, so thinking about that, how do we commit to building relationships that serve our donors' interests rather than this transactional process that we move through that serve our interests? And here's a challenge, because when you actually spend time investing in relationships, it costs money. Not every conversation you have will be about getting money. You actually have to change the paradigm. I spent last week in Taiwan. One of the things I really love about being in Taiwan and working in other environments similar is this sense of long-term relationships and trust, and absolutely becoming open-handed and spending time and investing time over many years to be a trusted person rather than just what can I have. So that's something that's really important to me. Secondly, we talk about market competition in the sector. I don't think we compete at all. Simply because if you think about substitution and exchange, that's not the paradigm that we're operating in. But we are in a busy, noisy, crowded market. There's lots of distraction. It's really hard to find your way to where you want to be, and how do you even know where to start? So, and we have a different level of sophistication and even care around market engagement. So my greatest concern in terms of the fundraising marketplace is donor care, because I think we've been abusing donors for a long time. And we need to get far, far, far better at care. But again, I'll come back to one of the things that stops us. So what do we do differently? What about mergers and acquisitions and collaborations? Stephen, where are you? There. So at TRI, you've got a group of different organisations coming together to do medical research. UQ, who have we got there? Queensland Government, Mater, of course. UQ Dominant, yeah, okay. So that's challenging, getting bedfellows since 2013 together in that common environment. I'm sure it's easy. You're only new there, Stephen, so it's really easy, believe me. So really easy. But this is a challenge, and I so often, I see in the sector again. Oh, well, what we do is different. What we do is special. Maybe not, but if you don't have the scale and the capacity and the capability, maybe you can't do it at all. So there is a really strong question of best or only. Are you among the best or the only doing what you're doing? And if not, where do you need to position yourself? At Mater, we are moving through a merger process as Mater Central and Mater North Queensland and Mater South East Queensland have become one. And it is a brave new world. But personal view only, as an observer of healthcare, very necessary. But not everyone involved in that would have agreed with that. So again, the important question for us is, rather than actually being the Hatfields and McCoys, or rather than sort of getting lost in founder syndrome, or rather than this federated organisation syndrome we see in so many cases, what is it that we're doing together, and how do we do that? Because curiously enough, the public expect that in the main. As I talk about Mater coming together, most of the people we talk to will go, "Oh, aren't you already?" One of our regular supporters who's been supporting us for years was talking to one of our senior health administrators about, what can you, my child was in Queensland Children's Hospital recently, do you have any connection there? No, that's not ours. It hasn't been for 5 years, since tomorrow.
Since it was called Latest Life.
Correct. Well, since Mater closed its Children's Hospital 5 years ago tomorrow.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we're told giving's declining. Is that the real problem, but is asking increasing? And I suspect on the strength of those ACNC numbers, that may be a closer element. So again, this question of, well, that charity pie piece may actually be playing out, but maybe the magic pudding is groaning under the weight of expectation. So again, if we're just out there asking, but we haven't got the back of house sorted, maybe there's a challenge there as well. And we talk about donor experience in the sector, and again, are we engaging donors transactionally? Are we prepared to pay the price of investing in relationships? And do we understand the price of not doing so? And I'd argue that in the main we probably don't. And what about measuring outcomes and impact? We talk about it, but we still persist in talking about and looking at cost ratios and league tables. And here's a brutal truth for anyone that is looming in that space. If we ever consider the brutal fact that around cost ratios and how we use them in the sector actually make no sense. And don't believe me if you don't want to. I can point you to any number of academic papers that actually prove this out. Okay? example, if you want to read Paul, McGregor Lowndes, Marsden and Flack, circa 2014 from ACP&S, it's a pretty conclusive case they draw in their study of annual reports, that of the 13 that they examined, only 2 had similarities in reporting. Everyone else was absolutely different. Okay? There is no standard. So there can be no comparison and there can be no basis. There is no accounting standard about this. So the problem with those sort of simplistic ratios, they measure moment, not movement. They're based on untested assumptions. There is no usable management data. Not really. And they mislead donors, and that's the biggest problem of all. We should be measuring effectiveness and efficiency, but we need to do it properly. And very rarely do I see organisations turn their minds to that. And that just has to stop. I can give you models, I can give you examples, but it absolutely has to stop. There's lots of examples. Ruth Knight's got a great paper on this, I'm happy to share, but again, just calls out this overhead myth, and she's not the only one. So again, another question just to throw at you, how well do we understand philanthropy and fundraising? Again, we still sort of see this fuzziness around terms. Philanthropy doesn't mean stamp collecting, that's philately. A good mate of mine, whose name is Nigel as well, actually, has a little stamp shop in Adelaide. He's philatelic, I'm philanthropy, okay? But let's actually understand what's going on for people, and there is enough research and enough market evidence for us to do this, rather than make assumptions. Oh, they've got lots of money, they'll give. Well, no, they won't. Why would they? And we actually have to start turning our minds to a serious study of this stuff, particularly if we are in governance roles and executive roles and management roles. It's just an abrogation of responsibility otherwise. I've heard for years, why fundraise? Oh, surely people will give. Because the Webkick did a study in 2007 that identified that 85% of gifts given were given because someone asked. Okay? So yeah, people will give if we want to settle for the 15%, but social change won't be driven anywhere near as far or as fast or as hard if that's what we settle for. So what's that all about as well? And there's another question I want to throw in here about leadership. Picking up a theme I already heard today, and it's about directors, board members, executives and managers. Are we bringing our A game to this? Are we really curious? Are we really exercising our study of what we need to do? Because the research tells us no. Scaife Williamson McDonald, 2013. Melissa Smith's work just been released with Perpetual just a few weeks ago. Sargent Shang had a couple of different iterations. It's conclusive. Okay. Now look, you can show me examples where it's great, and I have a great example. My board actually is a really good example of that. Why we've worked together for so long, but it's not the universal experience. And again, very happy to hear a spirited defence to the contrary. So a couple of observations in closing. We're in the business of hope, so how do we actually sell that hope through the notion of what we do in affecting social change and the benefit? I'll just leave that question with you. And asked me to talk about the next 20 years. I'm just going to give you a few quick headlines and we can touch on those in the time we've got. Baby boomers, I'm one. I turn 60 next year, so and I'm at the tail end of that baby boomer cohort, but there's a lot of us. There's a lot of us born between 1946 and 1964. So what does that do in terms of wealth? An intergenerational wealth transfer estimated to be in the sort of $40 trillion is a massive piece. Single households, a lot of other factors going in market. A challenge to traditional NPO structures, that's certainly a disruption of the market. Balance of power in philanthropy is interesting. It's been traditionally held and that's changing. Role of government, emerging markets, Asian markets is interesting. Technology we talked about. Scale and sustainability is a question they're words we use, but I'm not sure how seriously all the time. The regulatory and compliance environment I see just getting harder. I think we're getting lost in risk when we need to be focusing on our response. And we need leadership. We need more cogent leadership. And I just want to touch on unexpected hurdles or issues. You gave me this challenge as well, Matt. You've got interesting challenges. I think off the back of a year of Royal Commissions, governance and executive leadership won't be limited to conversations around banks, aged care or disability. It's everywhere. Scandals, trust and confidence in our sector. Scandals are corrosive. Regulatory shifts, I mentioned technology already. Cultural ethic influences, I think, are one that we continue to experience as well. and shifts in wealth distribution, political frameworks and social influences are coming our way. What are they going to be? I actually can't tell you. I can't see that far into the future. But I think they're all things we need to pay attention to. I haven't touched a lot on what's happening at Marta. I'm happy to cover on that. But suffice to say that even in our world, as we move into a dynamic of a changing Uber structure, there are also market challenges and influences from Marta Foundation that will fundamentally change the way we've operated for the past decade in growth that's been significant. I talked about 2 to 70 million in the last decade or so. It's been around 20 to 70 in that growth. We won't ever grow in that way again. I'm happy to talk about why. So now it's very much in some of those themes. It's about really connecting with supporters, really making sure we've got the systems under our hood to work that, and focus heavily on keeping people, not just finding people in a supporter base, and most importantly have real authentic conversations about outcomes and impact. It's a scattering of ideas, a lot throwing at you. Happy as time permits to take questions.
Time for some questions. Make the most.
I have a question. You mentioned the relationship with the donors needs to change. What is Marta doing in that space?
Yeah, well, we've a couple of things that are headlines. We've spent the last year and a half working on improved operating systems, so we've actually got better data capture and management support, so we can use data to best advantage. I asked a question a few months ago, having shifted house 12 months ago. I wonder if I'd changed my record to find, probably not surprising, I had 5 records. Okay, so that's important. We've had a supporter care program going for a couple of years now, really helping to shift people's focus on supporter care. I wish this were easier work than it really is. It's shifting thinking. One of the things that I would also seek to do somewhere inside or outside the organisation is to focus far more on training people working in fundraising practice to understand their job is not running things, it's actually bringing things together. You know, I think in fundraising we teach people how to make bricks. We don't teach people how to put the bricks together, and we don't certainly teach people how to build houses. So we need to be far better at those things that we're working with. And also embedding philanthropy as a culture in the larger organisation.
Yeah, you would have to have every staff member every staff member would be part of that culture.
In 7,000 it's almost impossible, but if we had 10%, that would be terrific. Yeah.
Nigel, do you think there's an issue of donor fatigue?
I think in the way that we're talking to donors at the moment, Brett, there's possibly that.